May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord. This morning, as I preach this sermon, I welcome those who listen to this sermon and watch it online. Today is the first day of spring. We have seen spring arriving with the beauty of creation emerging from the dormancy of winter, and now we see a multiple of plants blossoming, including daffodils, camellias, magnolias, rhododendrons, and the early prunus trees already in full flower. Once again, we are invited to reflect on God's creation and the beauty that God provides for us. I feel that as we embrace the emergence of spring, we come to life. We get a desire to undertake spring cleaning. Well, I do anyway. A desire to polish my car, to want to go for a walk and get some exercise. I find spring is a time that I also feel invited to look beyond the darkness and heaviness that winter can be, and to find hope through the promise of warmer days with sunshine, longer evenings, and energy to do more. I also think spring is an invitation from God to enjoy all that God offers. It is a time to look positively and move from the thoughts of our past and look to the future. It is a time to embrace the warming of our souls as much as a warming of our bodies. The reading from the Song of Solomon is a beautiful song of love that comes to us in the delights of spring. There is an enthusiasm in the words of the young girl who waits for her larger-than-life lover, who she likens to a gazelle and a young stag. We hear her announce his arrival when she hears the voice of her beloved, and she proclaims, "Look, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills." Her joy is realised when she announces that her beloved speaks to her, saying, "Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away, for now the winter is past." This passage shows an enthusiasm that comes at springtime, and with that enthusiasm, it offers joy and hope and happiness. I wonder if this song of love is a metaphor for our relationship with God. Do we feel more attracted to God in springtime as we appreciate the beauty that God provides? Do we see all that God provides as pointers towards joy and hope and happiness? Our psalm is another love song that was written for a royal wedding. While it speaks of the king's appearance, the message is explicit in its connection to God, as it speaks of God's throne enduring forever and of God's love for righteousness and God's hate for wickedness. This psalm reminds us of the importance of our relationship with God. God knows us better than we know ourselves, and when we achieve a way of being that is pleasing to the Lord's ways, we please God. But pleasing God isn't always as it seems. It is not simply an outward appearance that others see, it is also what God sees as our intentions from within. Our gospel reading has Jesus and his disciples being watched by the authorities. They noticed that some of Jesus' disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. Clearly, personal hygiene is important through all generations and was a focus for the Jewish practices in the time of Jesus. But Jesus moves the focus from day-to-day hygiene to addressing the deeper issue he perceives. So it is not surprising to hear Jesus speak out against the Pharisees and the scribes for their criticism of Jesus and his disciples. Jesus reminds the Pharisees and scribes that the source of our relationship with God is from the heart. True worship, as well as evil thoughts, emerge from within us. Jesus is adamant that we understand this as we hear him call the crowd again, and he said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." Jesus knows the hearts and minds of those present. He responds to the Pharisees and the scribes when they questioned the disciples' behaviour that veered from the traditions they lived by, through reminding them of a prophecy of Isaiah. Isaiah shows Jesus was right when he called them hypocrites. Isaiah's prophecy says, "This people honours me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines." Jesus points out that his disciples are being criticised for not adhering to human rules, and that the Pharisees and scribes are turning the human rules into beliefs that they assign for righteous living. Jesus rightly tells them that they abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition. This sets the scene for Jesus to teach the gathered people how he sees God's way, and Jesus invites us to see ourselves how God sees us. Jesus teaches that it is not what we put into our bodies that defiles, but it is our choices and attitudes from within that leads us to sin. He lists the defiling attributes as a person's evil intentions and tells us that every outward act of sin comes from an inward choice. Not washing our hands before eating doesn't bode well for personal health and well-being, but the point Jesus makes is how we act from our hearts in a way that goes against God's will is more to the point. Jesus is guiding those who heard him talk, and we can learn from his teachings in our times. Jesus encourages us to keep watch on our thoughts and our decisions, as very often our departure from goodness and from God begins with the choices that we make in life. I believe that reflecting on our relationship with God and with one another, we are invited to look at our ethical human behaviours and to adjust our thoughts and actions to align them with what God, through Jesus, desires. We are being invited into a way of life that we can liken to moving from darkness to light. This is a behavioural change which mirrors what God did for each of us when we were called by God and responded through baptism. We adjust our beings through faith. We move from a season of winter, and through God's love for us, we begin to live into the spring of renewed life that leads to joy and hope and happiness. Today, each of us are being challenged to reflect on our inward beings and how our thoughts, words, and actions present us to the outside world as much as it is about how God sees our inward intentions. What are the things that you think and say and do that you feel God would judge you for? How can you change in your ways to build a better relationship with God, with your family and friends, and with your neighbour? Jesus gave us a new commandment to love one another as he loves us. Adjusting our inner beings is a way for us to grow this love and to live as I believe Christ is calling us to live. May you find time to reflect upon your life, the dark spots within that God is calling you to lighten. And may you find joy and hope and happiness as you bring about the changes you feel appropriate to enhance the relationship that you have with your God, your neighbour, and yourself. Amen.